Good morning, everybody. Happy Easter. This is a live update on the severe weather threat that's anticipated this week, especially on Wednesday and Thursday. I'm eyeing Wednesday across portions of Arkansas into southeastern Missouri, southern Illinois, possibly into western Tennessee, Kentucky, and Mississippi on Wednesday evening. But there are definitely some model discrepancies. I call this on the Namm the dreaded 850 low ejection. This is on Wednesday afternoon, just as this system was about to eject. The GFS dominates this southern bulb of the 850 low, so it is trending further south with the ejection of this trough, whereas the European model is a bit of the outlier, bringing this dominance of the northern bulb of this system and sliding it across portions of the upper Midwest. But I do think that the southern mode is going to dominate. There's a big jet streak coming in there. The models have been trending further and further south so far this year. I was kind of using many of the trends that we've seen so far this season to really target this southern dominance of this system. And I think that the moisture is going to be a little bit late to make Tuesday a significant severe weather day across portions of Kansas and southern Nebraska, maybe even northern Oklahoma late, but it does look like that moisture is going to be relatively late as we have low 60s dew points all the way down pretty far south into the western Gulf of Mexico. So the moisture, at least on Tuesday, is going to be quite marginal, even though the kinematics are incredibly favorable on Tuesday. If that system were to eject later on during late April into May, we'd probably be talking about a tornado outbreak across the central and southern plains on Tuesday as well. But since we're in the early season, we're still looking at early April. I think that we're going to be targeting portions of the Mid-South on this day, Arkansas, down into northern Louisiana, maybe East Texas, but likely toward that Missouri boot heel, western Tennessee, western Kentucky region on Wednesday. But I also wanted to recap the super outbreak that happened yesterday into the overnight last night, April 3rd and 4th, 1974. That was one of the worst, most significant outbreaks, especially in terms of violent tornadoes, with 7 F5s, 23 F4 tornadoes, just an unprecedented event in terms of the synoptic scale space for favorable wind shear and instability for a strong violent tornado threat. 7 F5s in one outbreak, and that was also at the tail end of a very strong La Nina event that happened during the winter of 1973 into 74. Similar to this year, that doesn't mean that a super outbreak's ever going to happen, or we may not even see one again in our lifetime. But I'm going to recap the upper level features, the surface low track, the warm front, recap an incredible paper by Corfidi et al. In 2009 that breaks down that outbreak as well. But first I wanted to discuss a few of these the system on Wednesday, including the model discrepancy that still remains. But I do think that indications are that this system is shifting south. But first, this is an incredible map by Dr. Fujita, a color map that depicts the many tornadoes of the super outbreak of April 3rd, 1974. There were a couple different modes of convection. This northern one that was right along a very strong surface low track as the warm front came up. These tornadoes initiated at around 1 p.m. early in central Illinois into northern Indiana. And then there was another mode, more of a traditional warm sector mode out ahead of a bulging cold front, and that was southern Indiana. A couple of these were F5s as well. You also had that mode down into Tennessee, and they extended into the Appalachians as well on this one. You had the Xenia, Ohio, F5 there as well, coming in from the southwest. Many of these tracking and crossing the Ohio River multiple times, passing just to the northwest of the Louisville area. I believe this was also an F5, but I think it might have been this further south one into southern Indiana. And then there was also an evening mode further south across northern Alabama, and these initiated down on a prefrontal confluence line further south along the front. You had a big low-level jet, slightly more veered upper-level flow as well, and this was a 75-mile-per-hour mover, an F5, that went through the Goodwin area there, put down another F4 that roared through Huntsville, and there was another late or evening storm even further southeast of that went through the traditional areas, eventually impacting Coleman as well. But I wanted to recap the super outbreak as it happened yesterday through the overnight hours there, and show you this famous map by Fujita, and then break down the upper level conditions that came together for this historic outbreak, and also compare it to what we're dealing with on Wednesday and Thursday as well. Just a totally different beast. This thing had on the synoptic scale was incredible. Had a really deep surface low into the 980s there. You can see a big occluding front. Surface low, or the warm front, actually began down into Tennessee, so pretty far south that morning. This kind of reminded me of an event like November 10, 2002, where you woke up during the morning and that warm front was way down to the south, portions of the mid-south, and then ejected off to the north through the upper Midwest, eventually and moving into northern Indiana by the evening. This is at 6 p.m., the evening of April 3rd, with this outbreak well underway. And there were even 16 tornadoes on the ground simultaneously during the super outbreak. But the super outbreak had many facets. You had the early afternoon mode up here as that warm front lifted to the north, just ahead of that surface low and that big arcing Pacific front, almost a pseudo dry line type of a feature there. But then this massive warm front ejected off to the north. Then you had kind of the traditional afternoon round out ahead of this bulging cold front here. A lot of storm motions orthogonal to that front. Supercell is able to move off that line, no problem, all day long. You can see some of the surface obs there, 73 over 63, 76 over 63, a little bit further west. Temperatures into the 70s, dew points into the 60s throughout the region. And then you had this southern mode that developed along this prefrontal confluence line into Mississippi, and they started producing tornadoes near the Alabama-Mississippi border, including that long tracked F5 that was moving at 75 miles an hour that went through the Gowan area. And again, this is also at the tail end of a La Nina season, consolidated upper jet, big time trough. Even a negative tilt to that upper level trough dominating the western U.S. And really the only time I've seen conditions so favorable for strong, violent tornadoes on such a large scale was the second coming of the super outbreak, and that was April 27, 2011. And it's really hard to put into words the feeling of chasing that outbreak. Almost complete overwhelming sensation. You would see supercells with massive hook echoes all over the place, multiple modes of supercells, almost difficult to keep track. Every single storm we were on had a large, violent tornado underneath it, very clean updraft basis too, not much in the way of HP type modes. When you get that perfect wind shear, perfect instability, the storms are very efficient at becoming a tornado producers, very compact tornado producing storms. But we'll definitely break down the synoptics of that event in more detail. But now I wanted to break down Wednesday's system. I mentioned that the Namm has almost a figure eight with the 850 low, and that's because it kind of represents the transition zone between this southern trend. The European dominates the northern 850 low there, a little bit further north track into the upper Midwest. The Namm is kind of a combination between the European and the GFS model, but I suspect that it'll trend toward the GFS. And then the GFS model has the dominance of this southern 850 low. And look at the difference at 18Z on Wednesday between the Namm, this is the GFS, having that consolidated 850 low over eastern Kansas, a very backed low-level jet centered over the lower Mississippi River Valley there, across eastern Arkansas, into the Missouri Boot Heel, into southern Illinois, with the nose of that low-level jet punching into southern Illinois there, the axis of the low-level jet pushing east into western Kentucky, western Tennessee, even northwestern Mississippi there. And I think this is likely similar to the 850 analysis that we're going to see on Wednesday, which is going to bring the potential for significant severe weather across portions of the central and lower Mississippi River Valley. And look at the European. This is the 0Z last night's European model, having that 850 low a little bit further north. This is the outlier, and I don't think that this is going to happen just based on what I've seen so far this early season, how these storm systems evolve. This thing's going to continue trending further south, more consolidated, and I do think that Wednesday and Thursday are going to be significant severe weather days, starting first across Arkansas, southeastern Missouri, back building into East Texas and northern Louisiana on Wednesday afternoon and evening. And then Thursday, looks like the warm sector expands a bit. Wind fields veer, especially those upper level winds, and the low level jet veers a bit. But I do think that there's going to be a track of significant severe weather, including the risk of tornadoes from Mississippi, central Tennessee, northern Alabama on Thursday. But even greater model uncertainty exists for that event on Wednesday. But that is my target area for Wednesday, so my plan is to target that zone, probably southeastern Missouri into eastern Arkansas, western Tennessee on Wednesday afternoon and evening. I still might chase on Tuesday. I'm watching that area in Kansas. Kinematically, the system looks incredible. Looks like you'd expect tornadoes on that day. But in terms of moisture and thermodynamics, it's still just a little bit early for the Great Plains to come alive. But I still could see some late night elevated storms probably across northern Kansas. Maybe if you get lucky, get some of those low 60s dew points into there late night on Tuesday. There is a chance of some surface-based storms there in Kansas as well. But I included the Namm here just because of that 8 shape, 850 low, and it really represents a trend in the models from dominance to the north to dominance with this southern bulb in a more consolidated upper level system. And again, here is the paper I'm going to break down a little bit later. Corfidi et al., available on the Storm Prediction Center website, April 2010. Awesome paper here to break down the super outbreak that included these many modes of tornadoes. Incredible map here by Dr. Fujita. Well, you can see the different modes. There was this early one, and there was even a tornado up into southwestern Ontario on this day to the east of Detroit. I believe the Windsor area was impacted by a tornado as that warm front lifted all the way up into southern Michigan. Had a couple early tornadoes in central Illinois there at about 1 p.m., just ahead of that surface low, the occluded boundary there. One of those was pretty long track into northern Indiana as well. And then you had the next mode that developed at about 2 to 3 p.m. across central and southern Indiana. Look at Indianapolis getting dry slotted there. Just missed the tornadoes. Not so lucky further south along the Ohio River Valley. Even had an F5 that crossed the Ohio River twice, narrowly missing the Louisville area, impacting portions of Louisville along the Ohio River there. Tennessee got hammered, Kentucky. And I wonder where I would have targeted on the super outbreak. I saw many threads that were out there discussing it. Not sure if I would have targeted the direct surface low track with that occluded boundary. Maybe the nose of the low-level jet and the jet streak across southern Indiana into Kentucky I likely would have targeted and just tried to drop down the line. That area there around the Ohio River Valley can be kind of a difficult area to chase. A lot of river crossings, some forested terrain, even some national forests there, especially southern Illinois into southwestern Indiana. Kentucky is a tough place to chase. I've actually never seen a tornado in Indiana or Kentucky. But I don't think I would have targeted the evening mode and had the patience to wait out all those tornadoes further north that were happening in the earlier in the day, and then just wait in Alabama for the evening for these long trackers that were moving at 75 miles an hour. You can see that particular F5 tornado that went through Guin took a little while to mature too. Developed in the late evening hour or late afternoon hours on the Mississippi side, tracked off to the northeast. Many of these areas, similar areas we've been chasing this entire season so far. In fact, there's even some tornadoes in far northwestern South Carolina there, even just to the south of the Asheville area. Little tornado. 148 tornadoes touched down during the super outbreak, and that number probably would have been a lot faster. And this paper breaks down the days in advance, the different levels of the atmosphere. Beautiful hand analyses. Let's go to April 3rd here. And this is actually the evening of April 2nd. You get this big jet coming into the Pacific Northwest at 250. That's going to help dig this trough and a large-scale trough across, dominating the entire western and central U.S. But you get a little bit of a negative tilt to the upper trough that punches into the central U.S., and that helps to widen that warm sector. Definitely helps to fire a very deep surface low that helps that warm front to eject pretty far to the north during early April. To have a warm front up near the southern Great Lakes, you need to have a big-time storm system. And he even had this really close 700 millibar low, even the evening of April 2nd, the night before the super outbreak began. So synoptically, you had all these closed lows. You had an open trough here with a negative tilt punching into the central plains, basically just opening up this massive warm sector downstream with big-time wind shear, big-time low-level jet. This is the morning of the super outbreak, 500 millibars. You even had this closed 540 contour at 500, a bit of a negative tilt, big jet streak still surging in on the back side of this system, continuing to amplify. This storm system was intensifying as it was moving across the central U.S. Toward the Ohio River Valley. portions of the Midwest that had that outbreak. Look at that close 700 millibar low. 50 to 60 knot 700 millibar jet pumping out ahead of that low there. This is the morning of the super outbreak. And look at that jet at 250, rounding the base of this negatively tilted trough. Textbook ski jump configuration to the upper jet, and usually at the nose of these upper jets, that's where the action happens at lower levels in the atmosphere. That's where you get that surface low, rapid cyclogenesis, 850 lows up there. You get the low-level jet downstream of it with this negative tilt and the trough, rounding the base of the trough just at the right time, right at peak heating, with that warm front lifting north and opening up that warm sector. Surface low was in northern Iowa by the evening of April 3rd, kind of an occluded surface low. Then you had this boundary coming around on the southeastern side, big front, big jet streak too coming around the southern side with that evening mode across western Alabama and eastern Mississippi, forming as this jet streak was rounding the base of that trough. This is the evening of the super outbreak as it was underway. But this is also an example of a dominant surface low lifting up toward the Great Lakes region with supercells across from north to south, from Indiana all the way down through portions of the Mid-South, Mississippi, and Alabama. Look at that 850 jet there, 40 to 50 knots. The strongest 850 winds were a little bit further north, and this is why I think I would have targeted this area, kind of the nose of that stronger 850 jet. There's actually a 60 to 65, 70 knot 850 jet punching into the Ohio River Valley here by the evening of April 3rd as these tornadoes were ongoing. This is the morning, April 4th. The next morning as that surface low is lifted up toward the northern Great Lakes. Big mega trough coming in. I bet there wasn't much in the way of severe weather during April after the super outbreak. This thing likely cleared out the Gulf of Mexico. Big crisp air mass on the backside of it. But this is an incredible paper to read here. 23 F4s, 7 F5s from this event. The longest track tornado was on the ground for over 100 miles, 121 miles. That was a Monticello, Indiana tornado. That was the very first F5 of the day to Paw, Indiana, touchdown at 3:20 p.m. And then later on in the evening, you had those 3 F5s down in Alabama, the later evening mode, coming in back behind it. And I want to show you this incredible ejection of the warm front. So this is the evening, April 2nd, the night before the super outbreak. Kind of as often is the case before these mid-south outbreaks, the moisture begins to come ashore as a coastal front, warm front way down to the south. You've got your parent surface low dominating as a Colorado low there over western Kansas. And watch how quickly this warm front lifts off to the north. This is at 6Z, starting to funnel northward here through the Mississippi River Valley as that low ejects. So you might have been targeting this zone just to the north of the warm front, maybe Kentucky, the morning of April 3rd. This is at 9Z. Rapid northward motion of that warm front through the Mississippi River Valley. Dew point 70 over 64 there in Jackson, Tennessee at 9Z. So that warm front lifted rapid to the north. This is at 12Z. Look at that warm front surging through western Kentucky there. Likely would have been targeting just ahead of this warm front, southern Indiana, northern Kentucky, that surface low lifting northeastward through Kansas. I would not have had the patience to remain down into western Alabama to get those 3 evening F5s on April 3rd. I would have been up here anticipating the arrival of this massive front. Might have even ended up in central Illinois getting those early tornadoes, get on the board early. There's some of the satellite imagery showing this massive clear slot punching into Indiana. That's at 1511Z, so this is before the development of these early storms, just ahead of this dry punch here. You can see it clearing out across central Illinois, setting the stage for the development of those early tornadoes at about 1 p.m. that moved across northern Indiana. Including that one tornado that's on the ground for 121 miles. And this is by 18Z, as these tornadoes were happening across central Illinois. Warm front punching way to the north out ahead of this surface low. 71 over 66 there, Terre Haute, Indiana. Up into central Indiana, you get 70 over 62, so incredibly unstable atmosphere down there. Meanwhile, down into Alabama, temperatures warming into the 80s. Dew points rising into the upper 60s to near 70 down there, setting the stage for that southern mode. Your cold front, very north-south oriented cold front, almost behaving more like a dry line here with this massive Pacific front. Then you get a reinforcing cold front heading through Oklahoma by afternoon of the 3rd. But the north-south orientation of this warm front, because of the very strong surface low bending back to the northwest across Illinois, allowed storm motions to remain sufficiently orthogonal to that boundary from the northern mode all the way down to the southern mode as those upper level winds veered a little bit aloft. That's setting the stage for those EF5s to happen down in the southern mode as well. And these are the severe reports between 18Z and 21Z, 1 and 4 p.m. Central Time on April 3rd. The mode here, you had that mode immediately to the east of the surface low. It was basically happening across central Illinois. Then you have the development of the northern part of the primary part of this outbreak across the central and southern Indiana into central Kentucky, and those would backbuild down the line, overspreading central Kentucky and central Tennessee as you go through the late afternoon hours. Interestingly, you had this early mode here across eastern Tennessee, even into the Appalachians. So that lone tornado between Travelers Rest and Asheville, North Carolina, happened relatively early in the event, likely a complex of storms lifting off to the northeast. These are the different modes of the storms identified here as well. Look at this iconic satellite image. This is just before 3:59 p.m. Central Time, showing the different modes of these storms developing. You've got this one in Illinois here, cranking, producing tornadoes. There is a particularly long track tornado on the southeastern portion of that cluster. Then you had the next mode crossing the Ohio River, a couple F5s there as well. These storms were evolving well to the southwest of Xenia, Ohio, narrowly, basically impacting northwestern portions of the Louisville area. And then you had a back build of those storms all the way down through central Kentucky into central Tennessee. And then you can already start to see the southern mode beginning to take shape here across southeastern Mississippi. Those would slide off to the northeast and become that long track F5 that was moving at over 75 miles an hour that impacted the Gowan area. And here's the warm front by 21Z approaching the Michigan border. And there were even tornadoes in southeastern Michigan, even moving into the southwestern Ontario area during the super outbreak. Here's this particularly long track tornado on the ground for 121 miles across northern Indiana, associated with that ejection of the surface low toward the northern Great Lakes. Here is the next mode. Evening mode down here into Alabama. Well, what an awesome paper. I suggest you check it out. It's on the Storm Prediction Center website. Corfidi et al. Here to break down this super outbreak. Look at that surface low. It's a 992 contour. Double-barreled low there. That's midnight as the nocturnal portion of this super outbreak was happening. Over here across portions of the central Appalachians between midnight and 3 in the morning, late night on April 3rd. So quite an incredible event. The super outbreak, definitely historic. Likely something that we may never see again in our lifetimes. And even though we did see the second coming of that super outbreak in 2011, April 27th, 2011. So this is the Namm model forecast showing that figure 8 ejection of that upper level system on Wednesday. And I think that's kind of shows the trending of the models from north to south. And then you look at the GFS, has a dominance of this southern bulb. And let's see how this event plays out based on the GFS. This is at 21Z, showing a core of that low-level jet across southeastern Missouri, southern Illinois, back even into northwestern Mississippi, eastern Arkansas. And I do think that these are going to be tornado producers. The GFS isn't very good at resolving the thermodynamics on these small scales yet, so I just kind of use it to look at the shape and positioning of the low-level jet and the 850 low. You can see this closed 500 millibar low coming in much further south, a big bowling ball of an upper level system over northeastern Kansas, 21Z on Wednesday. And then you can see the strong flow on the southern and southeastern periphery of this system. $992 low. So the surface features are equivalent to the 1974 Super Outbreak, but in terms of the upper level system, you just don't have this massive trough dominating the whole entire western U.S. A much more compact of an upper level system, even some ridging behind it. You don't have a lot of that flow on the back side of it, cyclonic curvature extending all the way back, but still a formidable upper level system that I think is going to lead to an outbreak of severe weather across eastern Arkansas, northwestern Mississippi, western Tennessee, Kentucky, and into southern Louisiana or southern Illinois. Normally, you want to target kind of the nose of the low-level jet axis, but these days it seems like further south along those prefrontal confluence lines is the place to target with slightly more veered 500 millibar winds. And these are the west-southwesterly 500 millibar winds over this target area. Quite westerly mid and upper level winds. That's going to lead to quite a bit of directional shear from the low levels to the mid levels of the atmosphere. So that's why I do think Wednesday is going to be the big day out here. I do think that on Tuesday you're going to have some moisture limitations across portions of the plains, even though it is quite a beautiful trough ejection on Tuesday. I can show you that trough ejection here. If this were happening later in April into May, you'd be talking about an outbreak of tornadoes across the Great Plains too. Favorably timed during the heating cycle. The only thing that's missing are those good dew points with this system. Meager dew points, but you're starting to see a resurgence of those near 70 dew points across the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. That'll likely set the stage for the next Great Plains event happening later on in April. But really, with these near 60 dew points up here, extending into Kansas, you get quite a strong capping inversion that tries to hold up throughout the day. But the GFS still has some tornado soundings out there, so there is a chance that you can get a surface-based storm near the nose of that low-level jet with some pooling of that moisture. There is a chance that those parcels could overcome this very stout capping inversion here across the southern plains. But I'm leaning toward just chasing Wednesday. Deeper moisture on Wednesday. You get those mid to upper 60s dew points streaming northward across the Mississippi River Valley. So I do think Wednesday evening is going to be a pretty substantial day across that target area. And then Wednesday, a lot of the flow veers. But you still have a strong low-level jet hanging on with that bulbous 500 millibar low. Oh boy, it looks like the latest GFS, at least the 6Z GFS, is really veering out the winds from 850 up through 500. So while there is severe weather that's going to happen with this setup, it looks like the tornado threat is going to be focused more on Wednesday for this, despite these westerly winds aloft. Look at this closed upper low over the Corn Belt with a big belt of strong westerlies. And there's a lot of instability down there too. So it could be some significant severe weather, some significant hail across northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, into central Tennessee. But overall, in terms of a tornado outbreak, I think the tornado threat is likely going to be maximized on Wednesday with this system because of all these westerlies throughout the warm sector across the Mid-South on Thursday. Look at all these westerlies dominating at low levels. Still, though, you do get some decent directional and speed shear with this regime, and supercell is moving a little bit south of due east. You do squeeze out quite a bit of storm relative helicity, even decent low-level shear for this. It's possible this event could be a bit of a sleeper, but the GFS is trending toward more veered flow across the low levels and probably a big hail-producing day there across northern Alabama. And the 12Z HRRR is just coming out. It'll be interesting to see if the HRRR convects surface-based storms across western Kansas. I bet it won't, just because it typically overmixes these shallow moisture type situations across across the southern plains in the early season. Really, there is a chance, though, of a storm going surface base right near evening, somewhere across western Kansas, right at the nose of that low-level jet. And that's the area that I'm going to be watching on Tuesday for the potential of activation of chase mode early on Tuesday. But I'm definitely going to activate it on Wednesday. And you can see this kind of meager instability axis being depicted by the 3-kilometer Namm, the Namm model. This is 18Z during the period of peak mixing, so you are definitely mixing out where this moisture is coming from further south in the plains. It's possible right up near that surface low you could get a couple of surface-based storms, maybe near the Hayes, Russell area up there. But boy, you're only talking about mid-50s dew points up there, and it is during peak mixing, so it is possible that near evening you can start to spike these dew points up to the upper 50s to near 60, maybe squeeze out a surface-based storm. But it definitely is looking like more of a Wednesday system across eastern Arkansas, southeastern Missouri, across that Mississippi River Valley, and on Thursday it's looking like some pretty veered low-level flow, but more of a hailer type of an event. But we'll have to see how these models trend. There's more discrepancy as you go toward Thursday out in advance across portions of the Mid-South. But it's that time of year. It's April. You chase everything this time of year. At least I do. Boy, look at that thing coming in even further south in the Namm. That's on Wednesday. So I think the Namm is going to dominate the southern 850 low as well, given that ejection further south. So Wednesday could be a pretty big day. The models are trending further south with time. I think there's going to be some pretty favorable photographs down there across northeastern Arkansas, southeastern Missouri, into southern Illinois as well. And that's definitely the zone that I'm going to be watching very closely. I do have more Storm Chase EDU classes prepared as well. Just had to recover after this last Storm Chase. I'm an old man now, so it takes me a few days to recover after these Storm Chases, but I'm going to start slinging content again here soon. Maybe not on Easter Sunday, since my mom and I are going to be going to catch newts. But before I depart for my next target areas, Wednesday, that'll probably be a Tuesday morning departure, unless I do chase the Southern Plains on Tuesday, in which case I'll leave on Monday. So the active storm season continues with March. Definitely way above normal during March in terms of tornadoes, but that's just put us for the year really close to normal, just a little bit below normal for the annual tornado count. But I suspect we'll probably shift to above normal during the month of April into May, with the second half of April into May being particularly active. But Wednesday looks like a decent chase across eastern Arkansas, southeastern Missouri, southern Illinois, those areas that I'm targeting. There's my target area for Wednesday, subject to change as the models continue to evolve, but that is my target area. Probably the northern part of this target area seems more likely, maybe the Missouri Boot Heel into northeastern Arkansas. But thank you, everybody. Have a great Easter. Hope you enjoyed my weather report this morning, this Easter morning weather report. Hopefully you guys have some great Easter egg hunts out there. Enjoy your Sunday, and then next week we'll begin another active period of severe weather. Never stop chasing.